Welcome to the show, everybody. This is your boy Lo Jackson coming to you live with the Only You podcast, where I do book reviews that are based on books that are going to help people understand themselves, how to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and put themselves going in the right direction once and for all. This podcast is built to enable people, to empower people, and to make us an all-around better group of individuals through and through the generations. You know, life is a learning lesson, and if you're not learning, then to me, you're not really living the fullest life of your fullest potential. And then today, we're going to be doing a book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And I'm sure everybody out there has heard of this book. It's been around for some years now. Gary Chapman was actually born on January 10th, 1938. He's an American author, a radio talk show host. He's known for, obviously, his greatest book is The 5 Love Languages, a series regarding human relationships. He was born in China Grove, North Carolina. Chapman is a graduate of the Moody Bible Institute and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree and Master of Arts degree in anthropology from Wheaton College here in Illinois and from Wake Forest University. He also received a Master of Religious Education and Doctor of Philosophy degrees in adult education from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary School. Chapman joined the staff of Calvary Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in 1971. And if you didn't know this, there's over 22 different denominations of the Baptist Church. Chapman is perhaps best known for his concept of the 5 love languages, helping people express and receive love as expressed through one of the 5 languages. Words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. Those are the 5 love languages that he speaks about in this book. Chapman argues that while each of these languages is enjoyed to some degree by all men and people, a person will usually speak one primary language, but all are important and can be ranked after taking the love language profile. The first of many books promoting the above concept was The 5 Love Language, How to Express Heartfelt Commitment to Your Mate, first published in 1992. The book has sold over 11 million copies in English. They've been translated into 49 different languages, and in 2015 edition consistently ranks in the top 100 sellers on Amazon.com, ranking in the top 50 as of February 2007. It also consistently ranks in the top 5 books on the New York Times bestseller list, claiming the number 1 spot at times. Gary also authored the 5 love language concept book for parents and children and teenagers, single adults, and a special version for men. He has co-authored the 5 love languages of apology with Dr. Jennifer Thomas, which focuses on giving and receiving apologies. Additionally, Chapman co-authored the 5 love languages of appreciation in the workplace with Dr. Paul White, applying concepts to work-based relationships. I think many more companies should look into that book and try to apply it. Maybe, like at my company, they have like a leadership training, which kind of uses Eric Thomas's "Surrounded by Idiots." It pretty much uses that book for their basis of their leadership program, which I wouldn't see a reason why they couldn't use the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. That would be probably pretty simple too, to apply that to your leadership training in, at a corporation. Chapman travels the world presenting seminars on marriage, family, and relationships, and his radio programs air on more than 400 stations. He is married to Caroline J. Chapman. They have 2 children, and they are Shelley and Derek. He's written several books, you guys, and Gary Chapman actually he's a really well writer. I would say I'd give this book 4 stars, 4.5 stars. It's a pretty great read. And chapter 1 is What Happens to Love After the Wedding. At 30,000 feet, somewhere between Buffalo and Dallas, he put his magazine in his seat pocket, turned in my direction, and asked, "What kind of work do you do?" "I do marriage counseling and lead marriage enrichment seminars," I said matter-of-factly. I've been wanting to ask someone this for a long time, he said. What happens to love after you get married? I think we all have that question. Relinquishing my hopes of getting a nap, I asked, what do you mean? Well, he said, I've been married 3 times, and each time it was wonderful before we got married, but somehow after the wedding it all fell apart. All the love I thought I had for her and the love she seemed to have for me evaporated. I am a fairly intelligent person. I operate a successful business, but I don't understand it. How long were you married? I asked. The first one lasted about 10 years. The second we were married 3 years, and the last one almost 6 years. Did your love evaporate immediately after the wedding, or was it a gradual loss? I inquired. Well, the second one went wrong from the very beginning. I don't know what happened. I really thought we loved each other, but the honeymoon was a disaster, and we never recovered. We only dated 6 months. It was a whirlwind romance. It was really exciting, but after the marriage, it was a battle from the beginning. In my first marriage, we had 3 or 4 good years before the baby came. After the baby was born, I felt like she gave her attention to the baby, and I no longer mattered. It was as if her one goal in life was to have a baby, and after the baby, she no longer needed me. Did you tell her that? I asked. Yes, I told her that. She said I was crazy. She said I did not understand the stress of being a 24-hour nurse. She said I should be more understanding and help her more. I really tried, but it didn't seem to make any difference. After that, we just grew further apart. After a while, there was no love left. Just deadness. Both of us agreed that the marriage was over. My last marriage, I really thought that one would be different. I had been divorced for 3 years. We had dated each other for 2 years. I really thought we knew what we were doing, and I thought that perhaps for the first time I really knew what it meant to love someone. I genuinely felt that she loved me. After the wedding, I don't think I changed. I continued to express love to her as I had before marriage. I told her how beautiful she was. I told her how much I loved her. I told her how proud I was to be her husband. But a few months after marriage, she started complaining about petty things at first, like mine not taking the garbage out or not hanging up my clothes. Later, she went on to attacking my character, telling me she didn't feel she could trust me, accusing me of not being faithful to her. Is that not crazy, you guys? And we have all been in a relationship like that with someone who had made us feel that way. And I know, honestly, I'm guilty. I have done this to lovers that I've had, that I question them because of my own insecurities. And I really do believe that. She became a totally negative person. Before marriage, she was never negative. She was one of the most positive people I have ever met. That's one of the things that attracted me to her. She never complained about anything. Everything I did was wonderful, but once we were married, it seemed I could do no right. I honestly don't know what happened. Eventually, I lost my love for her and began to resent her. She obviously had no love for me. We agreed there was no benefit to living together any longer, so we split. That's rough, man, honestly. As long as you're with somebody, that's as long as it takes to actually get over them, too. That was a year ago. So my question is, what happens to love after the wedding? Is my experience common? Is that why we have so many divorces in our country? I can't believe that it happened to me 3 times. And those who don't divorce, do they learn to live with the emptiness, or does love really stay alive in some marriages? If so, how? The questions my friend seated in 5A was asking are the questions that thousands of married and divorced persons ask daily. Some are asking friends, some are asking counselors and clergy, and some are asking themselves. Sometimes the answers are couched in psychological research jargon that is almost incomprehensible. Sometimes they are couched in humor and folklore. Most of the jokes and pithy sayings contain some truth, but they are like offering an aspirin to a person with cancer. The desire for romantic love and marriage is deeply rooted in our psychological makeup. Books abound on the subject. Television and radio talk shows deal with it. The internet is full of advice. So are our parents and friends and churches. Keep love alive in our marriages is serious business. Yeah, keeping love alive in our marriages is serious business. Amen. With all the help available from media experts, why is it that so few couples seem to have found the secret to keeping love alive after the wedding? Why is it that a couple can attend a communication workshop, hear wonderful ideas on how to enhance communication, return home, and find themselves totally unable to implement the communication patterns demonstrated? How is it that we read something online on 101 ways to express love to your spouse, select 2 or 3 ways that seem especially helpful, try them, and our spouse don't even acknowledge our effort? We give up on the other 98 ways and go back to life as usual. The truth we're missing. The answer to those questions is the purpose of this book. It is not that the books and articles already published are not helpful. The problem is that we have overlooked one fundamental truth. People speak different love languages. My dynamic training is in the area of anthropology. Therefore, I have studied in the area of linguistics, which identifies a number of major language groups: Japanese, Chinese, Spanish, English, Portuguese, Arabic, Greek, German, French, and so on. Most of us grow up learning the language of our parents and siblings, which become our primary or native tongue. Later, we may learn additional languages, but usually with much more effort. These become our secondary languages. We speak and understand best our native language. We feel most comfortable speaking that language. The more we use a secondary language, the more comfortable we become conversing in it. If we speak only our primary language and encounter someone else who speaks only his or her primary language, which is different from ours, our communication will be limited. We must rely on one point: grunting, drawing pictures, or acting out our ideas. We can communicate, but it is awkward. Language differences are part and parcel of human culture. If we are to communicate effectively across cultural lines, we must learn the languages of those with whom we wish to communicate. That is so true. In the area of love, it is similar. Your emotional love language and the language of your spouse may be as different as Chinese from English. No matter how hard you try to express love in English, if your spouse understands only Chinese, you will never understand how to love each other. My friend on the plane was speaking the language of affirming words to his third wife when he said, "I told her how beautiful she was. I told her I loved her. I told her how proud I was to be her husband." He was speaking love, and he was sincere. But she did not understand his language. Perhaps she was looking for love in his behavior and didn't see it. Being sincere is not enough. We must be willing to learn our spouse's primary love language if we are to be effective communicators of love. My conclusion after many years of marriage counseling is that there are 5 emotional love languages, 5 ways that people speak and understand emotional love. In the field of linguistics, a language may have numerous dialects or variations. Similarly, within the 5 basic emotional love languages, there are many dialects. The number of ways to express love within a love language is limited only by one's imagination. The important thing is to speak the love language of your spouse. Seldom do a husband and wife have the same primary emotional love language. We tend to speak our primary love language, and we become confused when our spouse does not understand what we are communicating. We are expressing our love, but the message does not come through because we are speaking what to them is a foreign language. Therein lies the fundamental problem, and it is the purpose of this book to offer a solution. And I think that this book is a 4 or 4.5 star review. Let me ask you guys this. How does your spouse respond when you try to show affection? Do they resent you? Do they make you feel silly? Do they make you feel awkward? Well, some people's love languages are different, And 2 of this book is keeping the love tank full. Love is the most important word in the English language and the most confusing. Both secular and religious thinkers agree that love plays a central role in life. Love has a prominent role in thousands of books, songs, magazines, and movies. Numerous philosophical and theological systems have been made a prominent place for love. Psychologists have concluded that the need to feel loved is a primary human emotional need. For love, we will climb mountains, cross seas, traverse desert sands, and endure untold hardships. Without love, mountains become unclimbable, seas uncrossable, deserts unbearable, and hardships our lot in life. If we can agree that the word love permeates human society, both historically and in the present, we must also agree that it is a most confusing word. We use it in 1,000 ways. We say, I love hot dogs, and in the next breath, I love my mother. We speak of loving activities, swimming, skiing, hunting. We love objects, food, cars, houses. We love animals, dogs, cats, and even pet snails. We love nature, trees, grass, flowers, and weather. We love people, yes. If all that is not confusing enough, we also use the word love to explain behavior. I did it because I love her. That explanation is given for all kinds of actions. A politician is involved in an adulterous relationship. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And he calls it love. The preacher, on the other hand, calls it sin. The wife of an alcoholic picks up the pieces after her husband's latest episode. She calls it love. And the psychologist calls it codependency. The parent indulges all the child's wishes, call it love. The family therapist would call it irresponsible parenting. What is loving behavior? The purpose of this book is not to eliminate all confusion surrounding the word love, but to focus on that kind of love that is essential to our emotional health. I lost my spot there. Our cry for love. Something in our nature cries out to be loved by another. Isolation is devastating to human psyche. That is why solitary confinement is considered the cruelest of punishments. At the heart of humankind's existence is the desire to be intimate and to be loved by another. And yeah, you can't have any of that in solitary confinement. And a 6x9 should not be allowed anywhere in the world. It's the worst thing to do to a human being or to an animal. At the heart of humankind's existence, the desire to be intimate and to be loved by another. Marriage is designed to meet that need for intimacy and love. That is why the ancient biblical writings spoke of the husband and wife becoming one flesh. That did not mean that individuals would lose their identity. It meant that they would enter into each other's lives in a deep and intimate way. But if love is important, it is also elusive. Warning. Understanding the 5 love languages and learning to speak the primary love language of your spouse may radically affect his or her behavior. People behave differently when their emotional love tanks are full. Before we examine the 5 love languages, however, we must address one important but confusing phenomenon: the euphoric experience of falling in love. Let me ask you guys a question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how full is your love tank? Seriously, take a moment to think about it. How full is your love tank? Have you ever sat back and thought that? Probably not. I never thought about it until I read this book 4 years ago, and it really resonates with me, and I still go back to read this book and think about that, And right now we're doing the book review called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, and this is chapter 3, Falling in Love. She showed up at my office without an appointment and asked my assistant if she could see me for 5 minutes. I have known Rachel for 18 years. She was 36 and had never been married. From time to time, she had made appointments with me to discuss a particular difficulty in one of her dating relationships. She was by nature a conscious, caring person, so it was completely out of character for her to show up at my office unannounced. I thought, there must be some terrible crisis for Rachel to come without an appointment. I told my assistant to show her in. I fully expected her to be burst into tears and tell me something tragic. As soon as the door was closed, instead she practically skipped into my office, beaming with excitement. "How are you today, Rachel?" I asked. "Great," she said. "I've never been better in my life. I'm getting married." "You are?" I said. "To whom and when?" "His name is Ben," she said. "We're getting married in September." "That's exciting. How long have you been dating?" 3 weeks. "I know it's crazy, Dr. Chapman. After all the people I have dated and the number of times I came so close to getting married." I can't believe it myself, but I know Ben is the one for me. From the first date, we both knew it. Of course, we didn't talk about it on the first date, but 1 week later, he asked me to marry him. You know what? I actually know somebody that, before he went to Vietnam, he asked a girl to marry him. And they knew each other for 2 weeks and they got married. Well, 47 years later, they're still married and still going strong and they're still crazy as ever. So it is possible. I've seen it in real life, you guys, and I know you guys have too. And back onto the 5 love languages. By this time, Rachel was rocking back and forth in her chair, giggling and saying, I know it's crazy, but I'm so happy. I have never been this happy in my life. I love those moments, don't you guys? What has happened to Rachel? She has fallen in love. In her mind, Ben is the most wonderful man she has ever met. He is perfect in every way. He will make the ideal husband. She thinks about him day and night. The facts that Ben has been married twice before, has 3 children, and has had 3 jobs in the past year are trivial to Rachel. She's happy, and she is convinced that she is going to be happy forever with Ben. She is in love. See, now right there, when Gary Chapman says the part that he did, he said, the facts that Ben has been married twice before, has 3 children, and had 3 jobs in the past year, it was trivial to Rachel because she was blinded by love. But in reality, if there was a way to take the blinders off and to think, literal about the situation, I think she would have made a different choice, kind of, if she was presented with, all the negatives. But I mean, nobody can ever tell you, and if somebody does tell you, like, oh, you should leave that person, you shouldn't be with that person, nobody's going to be able to tell you what to do. Once you're in love, and it's hard to get out of it. She is in love, it says. Most of us enter marriage by way of the in-love experience. We meet someone whose physical characteristics and personality traits create enough electrical shock to trigger our love alert system. The bells go off. We set in motion the process of getting to know the person. The first step may be sharing a hamburger or steak, depending on our budget. But our real interest is not in food. We are on a quest to discover love. Could this warm, tingly feeling I have inside be the real thing? Sometimes we lose the tingles on the first date. Yeah. I want to tell you guys about my first online dating experience. I actually met this girl online in San Antonio, Texas. I was 18 years old and I was using like Yahoo chats. In reality, I took my best friend with me because I didn't know this person. I met her on the internet. She had had 1 drink. She looks over at me and she's like, I'm really a werewolf. I kid you not. That was my first and last time of online dating. Anyways, back to the 5 love languages. I am not kidding. I'm dead serious about that. Sometimes we lose those tingles on the first date. We find out that he spends time on crackpot websites, porn sites. She attended 6 colleges, has $100,000 in debt, and the tiny tingles run right out of our toes. We want no more hamburgers with them. Other times, however, the tingles are stronger after the burger than before. We arrange for a few more together experiences, and before long, the level of intensity has increased to the point where we find ourselves saying, I think I'm falling in love. Eventually, we are convinced that it is the real thing, and we tell the other person, hoping the feeling is reciprocal. If it isn't, things cool off a bit, or we redouble our efforts to impress and eventually win the love of our beloved. I find that to be interesting. We're going on. Reality intrudes. Welcome to the real world of marriage, where hairs are always on the sink and little white spots cover the mirror, where discussions centered not on where should we eat tonight, but why didn't you get milk? Oh, you gotta love those moments. It is a world where bills and in-laws and jobs and children all clamor for our attention. A world where routine and resentment can silently eat away at the love we once had. In this world, a look can hurt and a word can crush. Intimate lovers can become enemies and marriage a battle. What happened to the in-love experience? Alas, it was but an illusion by which we were tricked into signaling our names on the dotted line, for better or for worse. No wonder so many come to curse marriage and the partner whom they once loved. And that's sad because a lot of us have been through that, and unfortunately, I too myself rushed into marriage right out of high school and was deeply taken advantage of for a very long time. And it is no fun when somebody does that to you. But it's life. It's a learning lesson. I'm grateful for the things that I did experience, and it's made me an altogether better, well-rounded person. Once the experience of falling in love has run its natural course, we will return to the world of reality and begin to assert ourselves. He will express his desires, but his desires will be different from hers. He wants sex, but she is too tired. He dreams of buying a car. She flatly says we can't afford it. She would like to visit her parents, but he says, I don't like spending so much time with your family. Little by little, the illusion of intimacy evaporates and the individual desires, emotions, thoughts, and behavior patterns assert themselves. They are two individuals. Their minds are not melded together, and their emotions mingled only briefly in the ocean of love. Now the waves of reality begin to separate them. They fall out of love, and at this point either they withdraw, separate, divorce, and set off in search of a new experience, or they begin the hard work of learning to love each other without the euphoria of the in-love obsession. And I believe in America we have learned to fix that problem. I believe the millennials that are coming up will no longer be getting divorced much more because the statistics are out and millennials are no longer getting divorced anymore. Some couples believe that the end of the in-love experience means they have only two options: resign themselves to a life of misery with their spouse or jump ship and try again. Our generations have opted for the latter, whereas an earlier generation often chose the former. And they're going back to the former now. Before we automatically conclude that we have made the better choice, perhaps we should examine the data. The divorce rate for second marriages is higher than the divorce rate of first marriages. The divorce rate in third marriages is higher still. Apparently, the prospect of a happier marriage the second and third time is not substantial. From in love to real love, research seems to indicate that there is a third and better alternative. We can recognize the in-love experience for what it was, a temporary emotional high, and now pursue real love with our spouse. That kind of love is emotional in nature, but not obsessional. It is a love that unites reason and emotion. It involves an act of the will and requires discipline. And it recognizes the need for personal growth. And if you guys don't realize that in your relationships right now about personal growth and discipline, you're going to be lost in all your relationships, and you're going to continue, jumping from person to person to person, thinking that they're the problem. But in reality, you're never taking time to self-analyze, go back to the drawing board, get your shit together, and be there for somebody when they were there for you at one point, and now all of a sudden you're having things go on. Now you don't want to be there for them as though, you're on a different level than they are. But at one time you were where they are now, but now the tables have turned and things are different. Our most basic emotional need is not to fall in love, but to be genuinely loved by another, to know a love that grows out of reason and choice, not instinct. I need to be loved by someone who chooses to love me, who sees in me something worth loving. The kind of love requires effort and discipline. It is the choice to expend energy in an effort to benefit the other person, knowing that if his or her life is enriched by your effort, you too will find a sense of satisfaction, the satisfaction of having genuinely loved another. And I think we all struggle with that sometimes when we're in relationships. That kind of love begins with an attitude, a way of thinking. Love is the attitude that says, I am married to you, and I choose to look out for your interest. Then, the one who chooses to love will find appropriate ways to express that decision. But it seems so sterile. Some may contend love is an attitude with appropriate behavior. Where are the shooting stars, the balloons, the deep emotions? What about the spirit of anticipation, the twinkle of the eye, the electricity of a kiss, the excitement of sex? What about the emotional security of knowing that I am number one in his or her mind? That is what this book is really all about. And for many years now, I have discussed the 5 emotional love languages in my marriage seminars and in private counseling sessions. Thousands of couples will attest to the validity of what you are about to read. My files are filled with letters from people whom I've never met saying, "A friend loaned me one of your DVDs on love languages and it has revolutionized my marriage. We had struggled for years trying to love each other, but our efforts had missed each other's emotionally. Now that we are speaking the appropriate love languages, the emotional climate of our marriage has radically improved." Do me a favor, you guys. Ask yourself this. Can you pinpoint a time in your marriage when reality set in? How did this affect your relationship for better or for worse? Seriously, think about that. Can you pinpoint a time in your marriage when reality set in? Because a lot of times people hum through their marriage, everything's all good, everything's all great, and then all of a sudden, one day they wake up and they're just like, don't want to be there anymore, and they're totally different. It's not the person that you married, not the person that you fell in love with. All of a sudden, it's a shell of a person that's so depressed, upset, down in the dumps, don't know what happened. And trust me, I've seen this happen. And I got 9 sisters, you guys, and they've all been married, and I've seen many, many marital issues arise out of nowhere that were just mind-blowing. And some of my siblings I thought had the greatest relationships and were the best partners, but in reality, one of the partners had been cheating on the other one for 20 years. So unreal. And the first love language is words of affirmation. Mark Twain once said, "I can live for 2 months on a good compliment." If we take Twain literally, 6 compliments a year would have kept his emotional love tank at the operational level. Your spouse will probably need more. One way to express love emotionally is to use words that build up. Solomon, author of the ancient Hebrew wisdom literature, wrote, "The tongue has the power of life and death." Yeah, that's true, A loose lips sink ships. That's my saying. Many couples have never learned the tremendous power of verbally affirming each other. Verbal compliments or words of appreciation are powerful communicators of love. They are best expressed in simple, straightforward statements of affirmation, such as, "You look sharp in that suit. Do you ever look incredible in that dress? Wow. I really like how you're always on time to pick me up at work." I love that. What would happen to the emotional climate of the marriage if the husband and wife heard such words of affirmation regularly? Several years ago, I was sitting in my office with my door open. A lady walked down the hall and said, "Have you got a minute?" "Sure, come on in." She sat down and said, "Dr. Chapman, I've got a problem. I can't get my husband to paint our bedroom. I have been after him for 9 months. I have tried everything. I know I can't get him to paint it." My first thought was, "Lady, you are at the wrong place. I am not a paint contractor." But I said, "Tell me about it." She said, "Well, last Saturday was a good example. You remember how pretty it was? Do you remember what my husband did all day long? He was cleaning out his computer files. So what did you do?" I went in there and I said, "Dan, I don't understand you. Today would have been a perfect day to paint the bedroom, and here you are working on your computer." "So did he paint the bedroom?" I inquired. "No, it's still not painted. I don't know what to do." "Let me ask you a question," I said. "Are you opposed to computers?" "No, but I want the bedroom painted." Are you certain that your husband knows that you want the bedroom painted?" "I know he does," she said. "I have been after him for 9 months. Let me ask you one more question. Does your husband ever do anything good?" "Like what?" "Oh, like taking the garbage out, or putting gas in the car, or paying the electric bill, or running to the store to get milk or toilet paper." "Yes," she said. "He does some of those things." "Then I have two suggestions. One, don't ever mention painting the bedroom again." I repeated, "Don't ever mention it again." "I don't see how that's going to help," she said. "Look, you just told me that he knows that you want the bedroom painted. You don't have to tell him anymore. He already knows. The second suggestion I have is that the next time your husband does anything good, give him a verbal compliment. If he takes the garbage out, say, 'Dan, I want you to know that I really appreciate your taking the garbage out.' Don't say, 'About time you took the trash out.' The flies were going to carry it out for you. If you see if you see him paying the electric bill, put your hand on his shoulder and say, Dan, I really appreciate you paying that electric bill. I am not suggesting verbal flattery in order to get your spouse to do something you want. The object of love is not getting something you want, but doing something for the well-being of the one you love. It is a fact, however, that when we receive affirming words, we are far more likely to be motivated to reciprocate and do something our spouse desires. You got to use encouraging words. Giving verbal compliments is one way to express words of affirmation to your spouse. Another dialect is encouraging words. The word encourage means to inspire courage. All of us have areas in which we feel insecure. We lack courage, and the lack of courage often hinders us from accomplishing the positive things that we would like to do. The latent potential within your spouse in his or her areas of insecurity may await your encouraging words. Perhaps your spouse has untapped potential in one or more areas of life. That potential may be awaiting your encouraging words. Perhaps she needs to enroll in a course to develop that potential. Maybe he needs to meet some people who have succeeded in that area who can give him insight on the next step he needs to take. Your words may give your spouse the courage necessary to take the first step. Please note that I am not talking about pressuring your spouse to do something that you want. I am talking about encouraging him or her to develop an interest that he or she already has. For example, a wife might pressure her husband to look for a more lucrative job. The wife thinks she's encouraging her spouse, but to him it sounds more like condemnation. But if he has a desire and motivation to seek a better position, her words will bolster his resolve. Until he has that desire, her words will come across as judgmental and guilty-inducing. They express not love, but rejection. I've been thinking about starting a handyman business on the side. Then she has an opportunity to give words of encouragement. Encouraging words would sound like this. If you decide to do that, I can tell you one thing. You will be a success. That's one of the things I like about you. Encouragement requires empathy, and seeing the world from your spouse's perspective, we must first learn what is important to our spouse. Only then can we give encouragement. With verbal encouragement, we are trying to communicate. I care. I know. I am with you. How can I help? We are trying to show that we believe in him and his abilities. We are giving credit and praise. Most of us have more potential than we will ever develop. What holds us back is our courage. A loving spouse can supply that all-important catalyst. Kind words. Love is kind. If then we are to communicate love verbally, we must use kind words. That has to do with the way we speak. The same sentence can have two meanings depending upon how you use it. The statement, I love you, when said with kindness and tenderness, can be genuine. It can be a genuine expression of love. But what about I love you? The question mark changes the whole meaning of those three words. Sometimes our words say one thing, but our tone of voice says another. We are sending double messages. Thank you guys for listening. This is the Only You podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for following me. We're doing The 5 Love Language by Gary Chapman. We've gotten to deep detail in this book so far, and right now we're on the title Kind Words. The question mark changes the whole meaning. The question mark changes the whole meaning of those three words. I read that part to you. I would be delighted to wash dishes tonight, said in a snarling tone, will not receive as an expression of love. On the other hand, we can share pain, sadness, and even anger in all kinds of manners, and that will be an expression of love. I felt disappointed and hurt that you didn't offer to help me this evening. Said with gentle directness can be an expression of love. The person speaking wants to be known by her spouse. She is taking steps to build intimacy by sharing her feelings. She is asking for an opportunity to discuss a hurt in order to find healing. The same words expressed with a loud, harsh voice will be not an expression of love, but an expression of condemnation and judgment. The manner in which we speak is exceedingly important. An ancient sage once said, "A soft answer turns away anger." When your spouse is angry and upset and lashing out words of heat, if you choose to be loving, you will not reciprocate with additional heat, but with a soft voice. I believe that. You will receive what he is saying as information about his feelings, about his emotional feelings. You will let him tell you of his hurt, anger, and perception of events. I am amazed by how many individuals mess up every new day with yesterday. They insist on bringing into today the failures of yesterday, and in so doing, they pollute a potentially wonderful present. I can't believe you did it. I don't think I'll ever forget it. You can't possibly know how much you hurt me. And we all do this stuff to our significant others at some point. I do believe that. And I see people like, "Oh, we're the happiest couple ever. We never fight." Really? And you're the happiest couple ever? I find that really truthfully hard to believe. I don't know how you can sit there so smugly after you treated me that way. You ought to be crawling on your knees begging me for forgiveness. The best thing we can do with the failures of the past is to let them be history. The past is called the past for a reason, everybody, and that is to be left there. Yes, it happened. Certainly it hurt, and it may still hurt, but he has acknowledged his failure and asked for forgiveness. We cannot erase the past, but we can accept it as history. We can choose to live today free from the failures of yesterday. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it is a commitment. And that is the truth. Humble Words is the next title. Love makes requests, not demands. Love makes requests, not demands. When I demand things from my spouse, I become a parent, and she the child. It is the parent who tells the 3-year-old what he ought to do, and in fact, what he must do. This is necessary because the 3-year-old does not yet know how to navigate in treacherous waters of life. In marriage, however, we are equal, adult partners. We are not perfect, to be sure, but we are adults and we are partners. If we are to develop an intimate relationship, we need to know each other's desires. If we wish to love each other, we need to know what the other person wants. Words of affirmation are one of the 5 basic love languages. Within that language, however, there are many dialects. We have discussed a few already, and there are many more. Entire volumes and numerous articles have been written on these dialects. All the dialects have in common the use of words to affirm one's spouse. Psychologist William James said that possibly the deepest human need is the need to feel appreciated. Words of affirmation will meet that need in many individuals. If you are not a man or woman of words, if it is not your primary love language, but you think it may be the love language of your spouse, let me suggest that you keep a note titled Words of Affirmation. Oh, that makes sense. Only the dumbest people write stuff down because then they never forget anything. When you read an article or book on love, record the words of affirmation you find. When you hear a lecture on love, or you overhear a friend saying something positive about another person, write it down. In time, you will collect quite a list of words to use in communicating love to your spouse. And I find that to be totally true. If your spouse's love language is words of affirmation, what would you most like to hear your spouse say to you? Or what would you say to your spouse? To remind yourself that words of affirmation is your spouse's primary love language, print the following. And it gives you words are important, words are important, words are important. That's what you put on a card, he's saying. And the second one is, for a week, keep a written record of all words of affirmation you give your spouse each day. You might be surprised how well or how poorly you are speaking words of affirmation. 3, set a goal to give your spouse a different compliment each day for 1 month. 4, learn to say I love you or other expressions of affirmation in a couple of different languages. Compliment your partner in the presence of his or her parents and friends. You will get double credit. Your spouse will feel loved, and your parents will feel lucky to have such a great son-in-law or daughter-in-law. 6, look for your spouse's strength and tell him or her how much you appreciate those strengths, but be specific. 7, occasionally email or text a note of affirmation during the day or when one of you is traveling. 8, thank your mate for something they do routinely and wouldn't expect to be complimented for. And the next love language, number 2, is quality time. And I think quality time is important in any kind of relationship. I should have picked up on Andrea's primary love language from the beginning. What was she saying on the spring night when I visited her and Mark in Little Rock? Mark doesn't spend any time with me. What good are all things if we don't ever enjoy them together? What was her desire? Quality time with Mark. She wanted his attention. She wanted him to focus on her, to give her time, and to do things with her. By quality time, I mean giving someone your undivided attention. You guys, you got to unplug, disconnect, put your phones away, and let somebody know that, they're more important than that gadget that you're addicted to. A lot of times I'm hearing more and seeing more on the internet that that's the biggest complaint out there, that phones were invented and now all of a sudden everybody's hyper-individualist. They just need their telephone and nobody else. It's not the way life is ever going to work. It'll backfire over time. I don't mean sitting on the couch watching television together. When you spend time that way, Netflix or HBO has your attention, not your spouse. What I mean is sitting on the couch with a TV off, looking at each other and talking. They call that eye gazing, and I had read that to you from a different book. And I would encourage anybody out there to do eye gazing. Just stare into each other's eyes with silence. You'll find things to laugh and love about each other. It means taking a walk, just the two of you, or going out to eat, looking at each other and talking. Time is a precious commodity. We all have multiple demands on our time, yet each of us has the exact same hours in the day. We can make the most of those hours by committing some of them to our spouse. And I find that totally, all the way around, correct. One medicine cannot cure all diseases. In my advice to Andrea and Mark, I made a serious mistake. I assumed that words of affirmation meant as much to her as they would to him. I had hoped that if each of them would give adequate verbal affirmations, the emotional climate would change and both of them would begin to feel loved. It worked for Mark. He began to feel more positive about Andrea, sensing her genuine appreciation for his hard work, but it had not worked as well for Andrea because words of affirmation was not her primary love language. Her language was quality time. I called Mark, who told me Andrea was still not very happy. He agreed that his love language was words of affirmation. He told me how much that had meant to him as a boy and how good he felt when his wife expressed appreciation for the things that he did. I explained that Andrea's love language was not words of affirmation but quality time. And I explained the concept of giving someone undivided attention, not talking to her while you're watching sports or reading text or you're directly looking into her eyes. Give her your full attention, doing something with her she enjoys doing and doing it wholeheartedly. And that's the part where I think people fail at quality time, is in reality it's so hard for us to be involved wholeheartedly that it never comes across as that we care. It's just as like we're there. We're not caring, we're just there. If that makes sense. Dr. Chapman, that's why she said she always complained about, that's what she has always complained about. I didn't do things with her. I didn't spend any time with her. She's always saying, we used to go places and do things before we were married, but now you're too busy. That's her love language, all right. No question about it. But what am I going to do? My job is so demanding. Tell me about it, I said. For the next 10 minutes, he gave me the history of his climb up the organizational ladder and how hard he had worked and how proud he was of his accomplishments. Do you want to be there alone, or do you want to be there with Andrea and the children, I asked. I want her to be with me, Dr. Chapman. I want her to enjoy it with me. That's why it always hurts so much when she criticizes me for spending time on the job. I am doing it for us. I wanted her to be a part of it, but it always goes negative. Things she has mentioned through the years, here is Mark's list. Spend a weekend in the mountains. Meet her for lunch. When I come home at night, sit down and talk with me about my day and listen as I tell you about mine. Spend time talking with the children about their school experience. Spend time playing games with the children. Go on a picnic with her and the kids on Saturday. Take a vacation with the family at least once a year. Go on a walk with her and talk with her. That's what I want more than anything, Mark said with feeling. The years have come and gone. Andrea and Mark have had ups and downs, but the important thing is that they have done it all together. The children have left the nest, and Mark and Andrea agree that these are their best years ever. Mark has become an avid symphony fan, and Andrea has made an unending list in her legal pad of things she appreciates about Mark. He never tires of hearing them. Next title, Focused Attention. It isn't enough to just be in the same room with someone. A key ingredient is giving your spouse quality time, is giving them focused attention, especially in this area of distractions. And I find that completely true. Quality time does not mean that we have to spend our together moments gazing into each other's eyes, which you should try that. Eye gazing is very important in a relationship. I mean, think about it when you look into your dog's eyes. Your dog and you have a moment there, and you create a bond together when you look into your dog's eyes. It means that we are doing something together and that we are giving our full attention to the other person. The activity in which we are both engaged is incidental. The important thing emotionally is that we are spending focused time with each other. I find that to be 100% true. Quality conversation. Like words of affirmation, the language of quality time also has many dialects. One of the most common dialects is of quality conversation. By quality conversation, I mean sympathetic dialogue where two individuals are sharing their experiences, thoughts, feelings, and desires in a friendly, uninterrupted context. Most individuals who complain that their spouse does not talk do not mean literally that he or she never says a word. They mean that he or she seldomly takes part in a sympathetic dialogue. If your spouse's primary love language is quality time, such dialogue is crucial to his or her emotional sense of being loved. Quality conversation is quite different from the first love language. Words of affirmation focus on what we are saying, whereas quality conversation focuses on what we are hearing. If I am sharing my love for you by means of quality time and we are going to spend that time in conversation, it means I will focus on drawing you out, listening sympathetically to what you have to say. I will ask questions, not in a badgering manner, but with a genuine desire to understand your thoughts, feelings, and desires. You have to talk with the people involved that you love and that you're going through life with, and that you're, encountering, words of affirmation, quality conversation, and you have to be in tune with that person at that time, or else it's never really going to work. I will not seek to repeat what is written elsewhere, but suggest the following summary of practical tips. Maintain eye contact when your spouse is talking. That keeps your mind from wandering and communicates that he or she has your full attention. Don't listen to your spouse and do something else at the same time. Listen for feelings. Ask yourself, what emotion is my spouse experiencing? When you think you have the answer, confirm it. 4. Observe body language. Clenching fists, trembling hands, tears, furrowed brows, and eye movements may give you cues as to what the other is feeling. Sometimes body language speaks one message while words speak another. Ask for clarification to make sure you know what she is really thinking and feeling. 5. Refuse to interrupt. Research has indicated that the average individual listens for only 17 seconds before interrupting and interjecting his own ideas. If I give you my undivided attention while you are talking, I will refrain from defending myself or hurling accusations at you or dogmatically stating my position. My goal is to discover your thoughts and feelings. My objective is not to defend myself or to set you straight. It is to understand you. Learning to talk. Quality conversation requires not only sympathetic listening, but also self-revelation. When a wife says, "I wish my husband would talk. I never know what he's thinking or feeling," she is pleading for intimacy. And we all have issues with intimacy and other parts of our lives, but I mean, if we did know how to talk and have a quality conversation with somebody, we would not have as many problems as we did in the workplace, at home, at church, wherever it may be. Self-revelation does not come easy for some. We may have grown up in homes where expression of thoughts and feelings was not encouraged, but squelched. To request a toy was to receive a lecture on the sad state of the family's finances. The child went away feeling guilty for having the desire, and he quickly learned not to express his desires. And we don't want that for our kids or for ourselves. If you need to learn the language of quality conversation, begin by noting the emotions you feel away from home. Carry a small notepad and keep it with you daily. 3 times each day, ask yourself, what emotions have I felt in the last 3 hours? I think that's highly important, Write down your feelings in the notepad and a word or two to help you remember the event corresponding to the feeling. Your list may look like this. Event, tailgater. Feelings, angry. Event, gas station. Feelings, very upset. Event, work project due. Feelings, frustrated and anxious. And he gives you, little things like that. That's a tool to put in your toolbox to help you become a better conversationist. Dead seas and babbling brooks. I am a babbling brook, you guys, if you can't tell. Not all of us are out of touch with our emotions. I'm not. But when it comes to talking, all of us are affected by our personality. I have observed 2 basic personality types. The first I call the Dead Sea, which that's a person that's an introvert. They never really say much. In the little nation of Israel, the Sea of Galilee flows south by way of the Jordan River into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea goes nowhere. It receives, but it does not give. And it actually has over 132 different types of salts in it. That's not in this book, but I wanted to tell you that little tidbit of useless information. This personality type receives many experiences, emotions, and thoughts throughout the day. They have a large reservoir where they store the information, and they are perfectly happy not to talk. If you say to the Dead Sea's personality, "What's wrong? Why aren't you talking tonight?" He will probably answer, "Nothing's wrong. What makes you think something's wrong?" On the other hand, extreme is the babbling brook. For this personality, whatever enters into the eye gate or the ear gate comes out of the mouth gate, and there are seldom 60 seconds between the two. Just ask Lo Jackson, he knows best. Whatever they see, whatever they hear, they tell. In fact, if no one is at home to talk to, they will call someone else. Do you know what I saw? Do you know what I heard? If they can't get someone on the phone, they may talk to themselves because they have no reservoir. Many times a Dead Sea marries a babbling brook. That happens because when they are dating, it is a very attractive match. And that is so true. Quality activities, in addition to the basic love language of quality time or giving your spouse your undivided attention, is another dialect called quality activities. At a recent marriage seminar, I asked couples to complete the following sentence. I feel most loved by my spouse when blank. Here is the response of a 29-year-old husband who has been married for 8 years. I feel most loved when my wife I feel most loved by my wife when we do things together. Things I like to do and things she likes to do. We talk more. It sort of feels like we are dating again. That is a typical response of an individual whose primary love language is quality time. The emphasis is on being together, doing things together, giving each other undivided attention. And quality activities is important. And we all know that without quality activities, nothing's fun. A relationship wouldn't be fun. Quality activities may include putting in a garden, visiting historical sites, birding, going to a concert, working out together, or having other couples over for a homemade super bread. The activities are limited only by your interest and willingness to try new experiences. And that's the truth. Quality time. Some couples are together a lot, more than others. If that's the case for you, don't try to make all your time together quality time. Designate specific times and places for planning togetherness. 2, ask your spouse for a list of 5 activities and he would enjoy doing with you. Don't assume you know. Make a plan to do one of them each month for the next 5 months. If money is an issue, space the freebies between the "we can't afford this event" 3. One way to share quality time at a distance is to include your spouse in your day as it is happening. Send a photo of something you saw on your walk to the office or relay a funny incident that happened. And 4 is think of an activity your spouse enjoys, but which brings little pleasure to you, like football, crafting, nature photography. Tell your spouse that you're trying to broaden your horizons and would like them to join in this activity sometime this month. Set a date and give it your best effort. 5, plan a weekend getaway for the two of you sometime within the next 6 months. Be sure it is a weekend when you won't have to be in touch with the office or have a family commitment. 6, make time every day to share with each other some of the events of the day. When you spend more time watching the news than you do listening to each other, you end up more concerned about the Middle East than you do about your spouse. 7, you have to do chores anyway, so talk as you dust, declutter, and do laundry. 8, read the travel section in the Sunday paper together and dream out loud about the places you'd like to go. Whether you actually go to these places or not, it's a fun way to share time together. 3, love language number 3, receiving gifts. This is my love language. And I think that a lot of people have this same love language, but they just don't know it. A reminder of love. When I studied anthropology, I was able to visit a group of people that they were on the other side of the world. I went to Central America and studied the advanced cultures of the Mayans and the Aztecs. I crossed the Pacific and studied the tribal people of Malaysia and Polynesia. I studied the Eskimos of the northern tundra and the Aboriginal Inuits of Japan. I examined the cultural patterns surrounding love and marriage and found that in every culture I studied, gift giving was a part of the love marriage process. Anthropologists are intrigued by cultural patterns that tend to pervade cultures, and so was I. Could it be that gift giving is a fundamental expression of love that transcends cultural barriers? It definitely probably is, or I feel it is. Mothers, remember the days their children bring a flower from the yard as a gift. They feel loved, even if it was a dandelion or a flower they didn't want picked. From earlier years, children are inclined to give gifts to their parents, which may be another indication that gift giving is a fundamental love language. Gifts are visible symbols of love. Most wedding ceremonies include the giving and receiving of rings. The person performing the ceremony says, "These rings are an outward, visible sign of an inward spiritual bond and unites your two hearts in love that has no end." That is not meaningless rhetoric. It is a verbalizing a significant truth symbol have emotional value. It is verbalizing a significant truth symbols have emotional value. Perhaps that is even more graphically displayed near the end of a disintegrating marriage when the husband or wife stops wearing the wedding ring. One husband said, "When she threw her wedding ring at me and angrily walked out of the house, slamming the door behind her, I knew our marriage was in serious trouble. I didn't pick up her rings for 2 days. When I finally did, I couldn't stop crying." The lonely rings stirred deep emotions within the husband. Visual symbols of love are more important to some people than to others. That's why individuals have different attitudes towards wedding rings. Some never take the ring off after the wedding. Others don't even wear a wedding band. If receiving gifts is a primary love language, I will place great value on the ring you have given me, and I will wear it with pride. Gifts come in all sizes, colors, and shapes. Some are expensive, others are free. To the individual whose primary love language is receiving gifts, the cost of the gift will matter little unless it is out of line with what you can afford. If a millionaire gives only $1 gifts regularly, the spouse may question whether that is an expression of love, but when family finances are limited, a $1 gift may speak $1 million worth of love. Amen. That is the truth. Gifts may be purchased, found, or made. But what of the person who says, "I'm not a gift giver. I didn't receive many gifts growing up. I never learned how to select gifts." That's my problem. I'm a terrible gift selector. It doesn't come naturally for me. Congratulations. You have just made the first discovery in becoming a great lover. You and your spouse speak different love languages. Now that you have made that discovery, get on with the business of learning your second love language. If your spouse's primary love language is receiving gifts, you can become a proficient gift giver. In fact, it is one of the easiest love languages to learn. If you are to become an effective gift giver, you may have to change your attitude about money. Each of us has an individualized perception of the purpose of money, and we have various emotions associated with spending it. Some of us have a spending orientation. We feel good about ourselves when we are spending money. Others have a saving and investing perspective. We feel good about ourselves when we are saving and investing. That is true. There is an intangible gift that sometimes speaks more loudly than a gift that can be held in one's hand. I call it the gift of self, or the gift of presence. Being there when your spouse needs you speaks loudly to the one whose primary love language is receiving gifts. And I believe that to be true. This is your boy Lo Jackson. We're doing the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. If the physical presence of your spouse is important to you, I urge you to verbalize that to your spouse. Don't expect him to read your mind. If, on the other hand, your spouse says to you, I really want you to be there with me tonight, tomorrow, this afternoon, take his request seriously. From your perspective, it may not be important, but if you are not responsive to the request, you may be communicating a message you do not intend. And I find that to be completely true also. Miracle in Chicago. I have to read this one to you guys. Almost everything ever written on the subject of love indicates that at the heart of love is the spirit of giving. All 5 love languages challenge us to give to our spouse, but for some, receiving gifts, visible symbols of love, speaks the loudest. I heard the most graphic illustrations of the truth in Chicago, where I met Doug and Kate. They attended my marriage seminar and agreed to take me to O'Hare Airport after the seminar on Saturday afternoon. We had 2 or 3 hours before my flight, and they asked if I would like to stop at a restaurant. I was famished, so I readily assented. Kate began talking almost immediately after we sat down. She said, Dr. Chapman, God used to perform a miracle in our language. God used you to perform a miracle in our marriage. 3 years ago, we attended your marriage seminar here in Chicago for the first time. I was desperate, she said. I was thinking seriously of leaving Doug and had told him so. Our marriage had been empty for a long time. I had given up. For years, I had complained to Doug that I needed his love, and he never responded. I loved the children, and I knew they loved me, but I felt nothing coming from Doug. In fact, by that time, I hated him. He was a methodical person. He did everything by routine. He was as predictable as the clock, and no one could break into his routine. For years, she continued, I tried to be a good wife. I did all the things I thought a wife should do. I had sex with him because I knew that was important to him, but I felt no love coming from him. I felt like he stopped dating me after we got married and simply took me for granted. I felt used and unappreciated. And when I talked to Doug about my feelings, he'd laugh at me and say we had a good marriage and as anybody else in the community. He didn't understand why I was so unhappy. He would remind me that the bills were paid and that we had a nice house and a new car and I was free to work or not to work outside of the home and that I should be happy instead of complaining all the time. He didn't even try to understand my feelings. I felt totally rejected. Well, anyways, she said as she moved her tea and leaned forward, we came to your seminar 3 years ago. I did not know what to expect, and frankly, I didn't expect much. I didn't think anybody could change Doug. During and after the seminar, he didn't say too much. He seemed to like it. Then that Monday afternoon, he came home from work and gave me a rose. And I bought you a rose on my way home from work to show a heart. I was sorry because it hurt. I don't remember the words of that song, but it was a good one by Kenny Rogers. I bought it from a street vendor. He said, "I thought you deserved a rose." I started crying. "Oh, Doug, that is so sweet of you." On Tuesday, he texted me from the office at about 1:30 and asked me what I thought about his picking up a pizza for dinner. That may not sound like a big deal to most people. Oh, baby, it does when you're both working, you're both stressed, and you're both getting worked to death out there, I know how it is. Work is tough at times. Doug never does anything like that. I told him I thought the idea was wonderful, and so he brought home a pizza, and we all had a fun time together. I gave him a hug and told him how much I enjoyed it. When he came home on Wednesday, he brought each of the kids a box of Cracker Jacks, and he had a small potted plant for me. He said he knew the rose would die, and he thought I might like something that would be around for a while. I was beginning to think I was hallucinating. I couldn't believe that Doug was actually doing this. Hey, Doug's turning over a new leaf, it looks like. She looked at me intently. "Dr. Chapman, this was a man who never gave me a gift ever. He never gave me a card on any occasion. He always said it was a waste of money. You look at the card and throw it away. He never bought the children anything and expected me to buy only the essentials." Is that not wild, you guys? And some of us are struggling with that right now out there. And some of us, go through this for 20, 30, 40 years until we end it and then realize, hey, I actually could have done something about it at the time, but sometimes we don't have the tools and the toolbox to get the job done, and we need books like this to help us get there. Gifts need not be expensive, nor must they be given weekly, but for some individuals, their worth has nothing to do with the monetary value and everything to do with love. So, reflect on ways to give gifts even if finances are tight. And I find that to be so true. The fourth love language is acts of service. Let's see. I discovered the impact of acts of service in the little village of China Grove, North Carolina. And that's where this guy was born that wrote this book, Gary Chapman. China Grove sits in central North Carolina. Originally nestled in China berry trees, not far from Andy Griffith's legendary Mayberry. Cool. At the time of this story, China Grove was a textile town with a population of 1,500. I had been away for more than 10 years studying anthropology, psychology, and theology. I was making my semi-annual visit to keep in touch with my roots. Almost everyone I knew, except Dr. Shin and Dr. Smith, worked in the mill. Dr. Shin was the medical doctor, and Dr. Smith was the dentist. And of course, there was the preacher Blackburn, who was the pastor of the church. For most couples in China Grove, life centered on work and church. The conversation at the mill focused on the superintendent's latest decision and how it affected their job in particular. The services at church focused mainly on anticipated joys of heaven. In the pristine American setting, I discovered love language number 4. I was standing under a chinaberry tree after church on a Sunday when a young couple approached me. I didn't recognize either of them. I assumed they had grown up while I was away. Introducing himself, Dave said, "I hear you've been studying counseling." I smiled and said, "Well, a little bit." "I have a question," he said. "Can a couple make it in marriage if they disagree on everything?" It was one of those theoretical questions that I knew had a personal root. I went right to the point. "How long have you been married?" 2 years, he responded, "and we don't agree on anything." "Give me some examples," I said. "Well, for one thing, Mary doesn't like me to go hunting. I work all week in the mill, and I like to go hunting on Saturdays. Not even Saturday, but when hunting season is in. Not every Saturday, but when hunting season is in." Mary had been silent until this point when she interjected. "When hunting season is out, he goes fishing. And besides that, he doesn't hunt just on Saturdays. He takes off from work and goes hunting. Once or twice a year, I take off for 2 or 3 days from work to go hunting." Dave said, irritated, "What's wrong with that? What else do you disagree on?" I said. "Well, she wants me to go to church all the time. I don't mind going on Sunday morning, but Sunday night I like to rest. It's all right if she wants to go, but I don't think I ought to have to go." Again, Mary spoke up. "You don't really want me to go either, she said. "You fuss every time I walk out the door." And we all go through stuff like this with our partners, and it's finding common ground and, thinking that I had a better start looking for a solution rather than prying for more disagreements. I looked at Dave and asked, Dave, when you were dating before you got married, did you go hunting or fishing every Saturday? Pretty much, but I always got home in time to go see her on Saturday night. Most of the time I'd get home in time to wash my truck before I went to see her. I didn't like to go see her with a dirty truck. As we continued talking, I learned that Mary had gotten married right out of high school and that during her senior year, Dave came to see her almost every night and stayed up for supper. Almost every night and stayed for supper. He would help me do my chores around the house, and then we'd sit and talk until supper time. I switched gears and focused on the third area of their disagreement. Dave, when you were dating, did you go to church with Mary on Sunday nights? Yes, I did, he said. If I didn't go to church with her, I couldn't see her that night. Her father was strict like that. I thought I was beginning to see some light, but I wasn't sure they were seeing it. I asked Mary, when you were dating Dave, what convinced you that he really loved you? What made him different from all the other guys you had dated? It was the way he helped me with everything, she said. None of the other guys cared about all that. He helped me wash the dishes when we had supper at my house. He was the most incredible person I had ever met. But after we got married, that changed. Turning to Dave, I asked, why do you think you did all those things for her before you were married? It just seemed natural for me. And why do you think you stopped helping after you got married? Well, I guess I expected it to be like family. Dad worked and Mom took care of things at the house. I never saw my dad do anything around the house. Since Mom stayed home, she did everything, cooking, cleaning, washing, and ironing. I just thought that was the way it was supposed to be. Now we're getting somewhere. Dave, a moment ago, what did you hear Mary say when I asked her what really made her feel loved by you when you were dating? He responded, helping her with things and doing things for her, or with her. So you can understand how she could feel unloved when you stopped helping her with the things. He was nodding yes. I continued. It was a normal thing for you to follow the model of your mother and father in marriage, because that's what happens, guys, when we get domesticated by our mom and dads. We take on their ideologies and we put our real selves in the corner of our minds, and we go back and forth with the judge and victim role. And that's what's going on here right now. The one thing that had assured her of your love disappeared. Then I asked Mary, what did you hear Dave say when I asked, why did you do all those things to help Mary when you were dating? He said it came naturally to him. That's right, I said. And he also said that is what he would want someone to do for him if she loved him. He was doing those things for you and with you because in his mind, that's the way anyone shows love. Once you were married and living in your own house, he had expectations of what you would do if you loved him. You would keep the house clean, you would cook on, and so on. In brief, you would do the things for him to express your love that he saw his mom and dad doing. And I find that to be true. Where am I at? After 5 to 6 minutes, they handed me their list. So Gary's having them write a list out. And I want you to make a list of 3 or 4 things that you would really like to have Dave's help with doing. Things which, if he chooses to do them, would help you know that he loves you. And make up the bed every day. Have the baby's face washed when I get home. Put her shoes in the closet before I get home. Try to have supper at least started before I get home so that we could eat within 30 to 45 minutes after I get home. That makes sense. I mean, that's really what anybody wants in their relationship, I think. I mean, kind of weird. What I learned from Dave and Mary. After years of research, I have realized that a unique situation Dave and Mary presented me. Seldom do I meet a couple who both have the same love language, in this case, acts of service. But you may be wondering, Then why were they having so much difficulty? The answer lies in the fact that they were speaking different dialects. They were doing things for each other, but not the most important things. When Mary and Dave were forced to think correctly, they easily identified their specific dialects, and when they started speaking them, their love tanks became filled. That's cool, man. Before we leave our Milltown friends, I would like to make 3 other observations. First, they illustrate clearly that what we do for each other before marriage is no indication of what we will do after marriage. Before marriage, we are carried along by the force of the in-love obsession. After marriage, we revert to being the people we were before we fell in love. Other actions are influenced by the model of our parents, our own personality, our own perception of love, our emotions, needs, and desires. Only one thing is certain about our behavior. It will not be the same behavior we exhibited when we were caught up in being in love. That leads me to the second truth. Love is a choice and cannot be coerced. Dave and Mary were exciting each other's behavior and getting nowhere. Once they decided to make requests of each other rather than demands, their marriage began to turn around. Criticism and demands tend to drive wedges. With enough criticism, you may get knocked off your square from your spouse. He may do what you want, but probably it will not be an expression of love. You can give guidance to love by making requests. I wish you would wash the car, change the baby's diaper, mow the grass, but you cannot create the will to love. Each of us must decide daily to love or not to love our spouses. If we choose to love, then expressing it in the way in which our spouse requests will make our love most effective emotionally. There is a third truth, which only the mature lover will be able to hear. My spouse's criticisms about my behavior provide me with the clearest clue to her primary love language. People tend to criticize their spouse most loudly in the area where they themselves have the deepest emotional needs. Their criticism is an ineffective way of pleading for love. If we understand that, it may help us process their criticism in a more productive manner. I agree. Doormat or lover. I have served him for 20 years. I have waited on him hand and foot. I have been his doormat while he ignored me, mistreated me, and humiliated me in front of my friends and family. I don't hate him. I wish him no ill, but I resent him and no longer wish to live with him. That wife has performed acts of service for 20 years, but they have not been expressed with love. They were done out of fear, guilt, and resentment. A doormat is an inanimate object you can wipe your feet on, step on it, kick it around, or whatever you like. It has no will of its own. It can be your servant, but not your lover. When we treat our spouses as objects, we preclude the possibility of love. Manipulation by guilt is not the language of love. Coercion by fear is alien to love. No person should ever be a doormat. We may allow ourselves to be used, but we are in fact creatures of emotion, thoughts, and desires. Allowing oneself to be used or manipulated by another is not an act of love. It is in fact an act of treason. You are allowing him or her to develop inhumane habits. Love says, I love you too much to let you treat me this way. It is not good for you or me. Learning the love language of acts of service will require some of us to re-examine our stereotypes of the roles of husbands and wives. These have changed over the last several decades, but models from our past can linger, and different cultures have different expectations of the right way things are done in marriage. Many acts of service will involve household chores. Not all. What are some non-chore ways to serve your mate? Question mark. The fifth love language is physical touch. We have long known that physical touch is a way of communicating emotional love. Numerous research projects in the area of child development have made the conclusion babies who are held, stroked, and kissed develop a healthier emotional life than those who are left for long periods of time without physical contact. Sheesh, I could never imagine leaving a baby without physical contact. They're so damn cute. How could you not want to kiss them and hug them and love them? Sheesh. Physical touch, but I know there are people out there that have no business having any kids. Like, their body doesn't produce the hormones they need to love children. I think that's just wild and bizarre. But the human brain is wild and bizarre and quite interesting. Physical touch is also a powerful vehicle for communicating marital love. Holding hands, kissing, embracing, asexual intercourse are all ways of communicating emotional love to one's spouse. For some individuals, physical touch is their primary love language. Without it, they feel unloved. With it, their emotional tank is filled and they feel secure in the love of their spouse. The power of touch. Of the five senses, touching, unlike the other four, is not limited to one localized area of the body. Tiny tactile receptors are located throughout the body. When those receptors are touched or pressed, nerves carry impulses to the brain. The brain interprets these impulses, and we perceive that the thing that touched us is warm or cold, hard or soft. It causes pain or pleasure. We may also interpret it as loving or hostile. Some parts of the body are more sensitive than others. The difference is due to the fact that the tiny tactile receptors are not scattered evenly over the body, but arranged in clusters. Thus, the tip of the tongue is the highly sensitive to touch, whereas the back of the shoulders is the least sensitive. The tips of the fingers and the tip of the nose are other extremely sensitive areas. Our purpose, however, is not to understand the neurological basis of the sense of touch, but rather its psychological importance. Physical touch can make or break a relationship. It can if I could talk, geez, sorry guys. It can communicate hate or love. To the person whose primary love language is physical touch, the message will be far louder than the words, I hate you or I love you. A slap in the face is detrimental to any child, but it is devastating to a child whose primary love language is touch. A tender hug communicates love to any child, but it shouts love to the child whose primary love language is physical touch. The same is true of adults. Implicit love touches require little time but much thought, especially if physical touch is not your primary love language, and if you did not grow up in a touching family. Sitting close to each other as you watch your favorite television program requires no additional time, but may communicate your love loudly. Touching your spouse as you walk through the room where he is sitting takes only a moment. Touching each other when you leave the house and again when you return may involve only a brief kiss or a hug, but will speak volumes to your spouse. Once you discover the physical touch is the primary love language of your spouse, you are limited only by your imagination on ways to express them. Coming up with new ways and places to touch can be an exciting challenge. If you have not been an under-the-table toucher, you might find that it will add a spark to your dining out. If you are not accustomed to holding hands in public, you might find out that you can fill your spouse's emotional love tank as you stroll through the parking lot. Whatever there is of me resides in my body. To touch my body is to touch me. To withdraw from my body is to distance yourself from me emotionally. In our society, shaking hands is a way of communicating openness or fist bumping and social closeness to another individual. When on rare occasion one man refuses to shake hands with another, it communicates a message that things are not right in their relationship. All societies have some form of physical touching as a means of social greeting. The average American male may not feel comfortable with a European bear hug and kiss, but in Europe that serves the same function as our handshake. There are appropriate and inappropriate ways to touch members of the opposite sex in everyday society. Their recent attention to sexual harassment has highlighted the inappropriate ways within marriage. However, what is appropriate and inappropriate touching is determined by the couple themselves within certain borderlines. Physical abuse is, of course, deemed inappropriate by society, and social organizations have been formed to help the battered wife and the battered husband. Clearly, our bodies are for touching, but not for abuse. Since my first visit to West Palm Beach, Florida many years ago, I have always welcomed invitations to lead marriage seminars in that area. It was on one such occasion that I met Joe and Maria. They were native to Florida, but they had lived there for 10 years and called West Palm Beach home. They had invited me to spend the night, and I knew from the experience that such a request usually meant a late-night counseling session. As the evening proceeded, I thoroughly enjoyed Joe and Maria's company. I found them to be a healthy, happy, married couple. For a counselor, this is an oddity. I was eager to discover their secret, but being extremely tired and knowing that they were going to drive me to the airport the next day, I decided to do my probing when I was feeling more alert, and we had 45 minutes in the car together. Maria and Joe began to tell me their story. In the early years of their marriage, they had tremendous difficulties. They had grown up in the same community, attended the same church, and graduated from the same high school. They liked the same music, the same sports, the same movies. They seemed to possess all the commodities that are supposed to assure fewer conflicts in marriage. They began dating in their senior year of high school. They attended separate colleges, but saw each other frequently, and were married 3 weeks after he received his degree in business, and she a degree in nursing. 2 months later, they moved to Florida, where Joe had been offered a good job. The first 3 months were exciting, moving, finding a new apartment, enjoying life together. They were about 6 months into the marriage when Maria began to feel that Joe was withdrawing from her. He was working longer hours, and when he was at home, he spent considerable time with the computer. When she finally expressed her feelings that he was avoiding her, Joe told her that he was not avoiding her, but simply trying to stay on top of his job. She began to develop friendships with other wives who lived in the apartment complex. Often when she knew Joe was going to work late, she would go shopping with one of her friends instead of coming straight home from work. Sometimes she was not at home when Joe arrived. That annoyed him greatly, and he accused her of being thoughtless and irresponsible. Maria retorted, "Who's irresponsible? You don't even call me and let me know when you'll be home. How can I be here for you when I don't even know when you'll be here?" To which Joe shot back, "I don't need a wife. Don't you understand? That's the whole point. I don't need a wife." But Maria did not understand. She was extremely confused. In her search for answers, she went to the public library and checked out several books on marriage. Marriage is not supposed to be this way, she reasoned. I have to find an answer to our situation. When Joe went on his laptop, Maria would pick up her book. In fact, on many evenings, she read until midnight. On his way to bed, Joe would notice her and make sarcastic comments such as, "If you read that much in college, you would have made straight A's." Oh, wow. What a terrible guy. Thank you guys for listening to the Only You podcast. This is your boy, Lo Jackson. And right now, I am doing the 5 love languages. And right now, we are talking about physical touch. The author gives... he has a question here. It says, recall some non-sexual touching times that enhanced intimacy between the two of you. What made these times special? 1. As you walk from the car to go shopping, reach out and hold your spouse's hand. 2. When you shop for your spouse, look for things that will appeal to their tactical nature. A cashmere sweater, a plush throw pillow, soft slippers. 3. Walk up to your spouse and say, "Have I told you lately that I love you?" 4. When you sit together in church, reach over and hold your spouse's hand during times of prayer. 5. Initiate sex by giving your spouse a foot massage. Continue to other parts of the body as long as it brings pleasure to your spouse. 6. When family or friends are visiting, touch your spouse in their presence. A hug, running your hand along his or her arm, putting your arm around him or her. 7. Couples separate by circumstances such as development. Use a variety of strategies to touch when they cannot be physically together, says author and former military wife Jocelyn Green. For example, a handwritten letter feels more tangible than an email. Some wives will wear an old shirt of their husband's around the house, one wife said. I feel like he's hugging me when I wear his shirt. Sending a photo of yourself gives your spouse something of you to touch. 9. Discovering your primary love language. And this is chapter 9. Discovering the primary love language of your spouse is essential if you are to keep their emotional love tank full. But first, let's make sure you know your own love language. Having heard the 5 emotional love languages, words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, physical touch, some individuals will know instantaneously their own primary love language and that of their spouse. For others, it will not be that easy. Some, like Marcus, who said to me, I don't know. It seems that 2 of those are just about equal for me. Which 2? I required. Physical touch and words of affirmation, he responded. By physical touch, what do you mean? Well, mainly sex, Marcus replied. I probed a little further and asked, Do you enjoy your wife running her hands through your hair or giving you a back rub or holding your hands or kissing and hugging you at times when you are not having sexual intercourse? Sure, said Marcus. I'm not going to turn them down. But the main thing is sex. That's when I know that she really loves me. That's just dumb. Sex is not a way to scale, how much somebody loves you and how long they've loved you. That's just crazy. Leaving the subject of physical touch for a moment, I turned to affirming words and asked, when you say that words of affirmation are also important, what kinds of statements do you find most helpful? And that's what I like about this book is Gary Chapman gives you questions, to question your partner. And that's the thing about being a counselor is he wants you to get to the answer yourself. He don't want to give it to you because the male is physically pushed to have sexual release on somewhat of a regular basis. He may automatically assume that is his primary love language. But if he does not enjoy physical touch or at other times and in a non-sexual ways, it may not be his love language at all. Sexual desire is quite different from his emotional need to feel loved. That doesn't mean that sexual intercourse is unimportant to him. It is extremely important, but sexual intercourse alone will not meet his need to feel loved. And that's the truth there. What is your primary love language? What makes you feel most loved by your spouse? What do you desire above all else? If the answer to those questions does not leap to your mind immediately, perhaps it will help to look at the negative use of love languages. What does your spouse do or say or fail to do or say that hurts you deeply? And those are questions that you always want to ask yourself because those are part of self-analysis. Thank you guys for listening to this. I'm doing the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. And this is a wonderful read. I give it a 5-star review completely. When I did read this book the first time, I was blown away that this gentleman had put together such a well-rounded book. Please feel free to follow me. Please feel free to share me. I am grateful for everybody's support. Once again, this is your boy Lo Jackson coming to you live with the Only You podcast. And tune in next time. Please leave me some questions and remarks either on Spotify or you can go to my email. My email is onlyyoupodcast2022@gmail.com. And I'm looking forward to all your questions and answering them. And please be looking in the near future this year. On season 2, I'm going to be going back and including the authors of these books and the interviews that I'm doing with them. So please look forward to that. And thanks again for listening. This is your boy Lo Jackson coming to you live.